So today is a national test day for the ACT, and I thought that it would be a good opportunity for my son to take a practice ACT. He's actually not old enough to take one yet. He's 12 years old. He'll be 13 soon, and when he's 13, he will be taking an official ACT. But today, I want to give him this. So this is practice ACT. It's June of 2020. So it's a fairly recent test. He'll be taking that today, and we're going to score it, and we'll see how he does. And we're making this video to share that whole experience with you. So a couple of other things to keep in mind. We are a homeschooling family. All of our kids, we have 3 kids, they've all been homeschooled since they were young. And early on, my wife was the one who did most of the teaching. And as they got into late elementary, early middle school, I've taken on the brunt of teaching my kids. Full disclosure, I am an ACT tutor, an SAT, ACT instructor. I've done that for a living. I teach high school students how to prepare for the ACT and also the SAT. I also do college admissions counseling. I help them write their personal essays and apply to colleges, choose colleges, things like that. So that said, Jayden, who's 12, he has had a little bit of exposure to the ACT. Well, I'll say that after COVID happened and all of my teaching went online, I did have him attend some of the courses that I was offering. He'd be kind of incognito in the background and he'd be listening to me teaching other kids. So he's had that experience. He's also taken a number of practice ACT tests. And so this is not unfamiliar territory for him. He's actually pretty familiar with the test, and I kind of know what he'll score, but I'm going to leave that as a surprise for you, and we'll see how he does on this particular test today. All right, so this is Jayden. He is 12 years old, going on 13. You're going to be 13 in a couple weeks. And so he's in 8th grade, I guess. I mean, we're homeschooling, so grades are kind of arbitrary, but he's starting his 8th grade year. And he'll be 13 soon, which is when I have him signed up for. So I have him signed up for the next ACT official test date, which is in about a month and a half. But today he's going to take this test. Jayden, how are you feeling?
I'm kind of nervous because this is one of the first actual full tests I've done. I mean, I've only done, I think, one other test that's been timed, so it is my second one, and it still makes me kind of nervous.
Okay. All right. Well, you have some familiarity with it. Again, you had it timed the last time. So what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for you today?
Definitely math.
Okay. What about math?
It's a lot of math. Well, the trouble with math is because I haven't actually gone through the higher grades of math, like trigonometry. There are some questions which I'm not really able to do, but I might be able to solve through process of elimination.
Okay, so math will definitely be challenging, and I expect that math will be his lowest section today, just because he hasn't learned a lot of the stuff that he needs to know for the harder questions. So you definitely need to make sure that you're getting all the easier questions right. I would say the other thing that you need to do really well today is pace, right? Pace yourself. Make sure that you're not spending too much time on any given question, and you're circling the questions that are difficult for you or are time consuming, and you're coming back and doing them after you've done everything else. Mm-hmm. Anything else that you want to keep in mind as you take this test today?
Probably with reading. I'm not sure. It's just that sometimes the passages are harder to understand and they can be really random.
Yeah, I will say that when that happens, you need to cut your losses, right? So try to answer as many questions as you can. Go on to another passage if that particular passage is too difficult. Make sure that you're doing everything that you can well before you start tackling hard stuff. Another thing is for the reading section and for all the sections, what you really need to keep in mind is the ACT is a test of care. A lot of these questions that you get wrong usually aren't difficult questions. They're just questions that you got wrong because you misread something or you overlooked something or you miscalculated. So as long as you're very careful, care and speed, right? Those are the two things that you need to do well. Okay, all right. Without further ado, let's get to it. So here's Jayden. He's about to take the test. He has his booklet and the Scantron. He has his pencil, calculator for the math section, his timer, and a glass of water. You'll also notice that he's wearing some earplugs just to keep out the noise. He'll go through this test, and then I'm actually going to give you a little bit of a time lapse of him doing it, and then we will go over the results. And here's Jayden inputting his answers after he finished the test. So now we will go over his results. All right, we will start with the English section. And so as you can see here, Jayden got 69 out of 75 questions right. But in fact, these right here, 14 and 15, this was after the fact. He just inputted them incorrectly into this form. And so he actually got these questions right. So in fact, this is actually a 71 out of 75 questions right. He got 4 questions wrong. And that is according to our scale, as you can see here. Let's see, 4 wrong or even 5 wrong is a 34 on the English. So he got a 34 in English. For the ACT, a perfect score or a top score in any given section is a 36. So he got a 34 out of 36. All right, let's move on to the math section. Here, we can see that he got 10 questions wrong. We looked at all of them to see if there was any inputting errors, and there weren't. So he got 10 questions wrong. As you can see, most of them all of them were in the second half of the test, and even the half of the questions that he got wrong were in the last 10 questions. And Jayden, what do you want to say about this right here?
Well, 6 of those questions I actually just guessed on because I didn't have enough time to actually work on them. So if I had been more efficient, then I would have been able to work on them more and perhaps get them right.
So that means that you had absolutely no time to work on them. You're running out of time and you just put something down, right? That's what you're saying. So yeah. 6 of these, you did that, and I think maybe one of them you got right just by doing AF, AF, AF. Yeah. But what would have happened if you had done EK, EK, EK on this particular test?
I would have gotten 3 right.
Yeah, he would have gotten 3 of those questions right. So that would have been, well, let's say that you had done that and then one of those that you got right, you didn't get right, right? So that means that you had gotten 2 more questions right, which on this scale, so let's look at 50 out of 60 and 52 out of 60. 50 would have been a 31, a 52 would have been a 32. So he got a 31, but had he guessed a different way, he would have actually gotten a 52. All right, this is reading. In reading, he had 35 out of 40 questions correct, so he got 5 questions wrong. Do you want to say anything about reading?
With the reading, the passage that I'm the worst at is definitely the double passage, where there are 2 because you have to read them separately and then you have to compare them. So I generally do well in the other passages, but that one is where I usually get most of my questions wrong.
So you got 1 wrong in the first passage, you got 2 wrong in the third passage, and 2 wrong in the last passage. So this is your humanities passage, this is your natural science passage, and was the paired in the humanities?
Yes.
Okay, so you got one of those paired questions wrong here, and then 1 question from probably passage A. And then with the science, you got 2 questions wrong. That 31 is usually a main idea question that you got wrong. All right, so 5 questions in all, not bad, but the bad thing about reading is the scale is not favorable. So if you look at the scale, you see that 1 question wrong is basically 1 point off of your score. Since he got 5 questions wrong, he has a 32. But for something like English, you can get many more questions wrong and still have a 35 or a 34. Not possible with reading and science, possible with English and math. So 5 wrong, that puts him at a 32. If he wants to improve his score, it's really a matter of improving a couple of questions. If he had gotten 2 more questions right or 3 more questions right, he would have had a 34. All right, this is science. Science, he got 2 questions wrong, so he did pretty well. Anything about science that you want to say?
I think that with science, it's just I mainly don't do as well on the actual science questions, so much of it is just following the studies and the different tables. But if it's asking an actual question about science, then I'm probably not going to get it right.
Yeah, there are some outside information questions, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 on any given test. And usually those are going to be harder because you actually have to know something about science to get those questions right. Otherwise, all the other ones are just following directions. All right, science, you got 2 wrong. That puts you at a 34. So 34 English, 31 here, 32 here, and a 34 brings us to a 32.75, which rounds to a 33. So Jayden, you had a 33 on this particular test. Pretty good score. Pretty good score. A couple things to sum up our experience. Number 1, for Jayden, the math was the hardest, which is expected. That's the hardest section for every student, for most students. And so he hasn't learned pre-calc. He hasn't done more advanced algebra 2. He hasn't done trigonometry. So it's understandable, but given that, I mean, he's done well by employing some strategies and getting most of those questions right, the ones at least that he was able to attempt. So he's gonna have to work on building his knowledge and also pace himself better for that section. With reading, he just needs to be a little bit more accurate, read a little bit more closely, and then with English and science, those were his 2 better scores, the 34s. It's really just a matter of performance on any given day, right? You might make certain mistakes on one day that you wouldn't on a different day. So he'll practice, and hopefully he'll be able to make some good decisions on the next test that he does. Jayden will be taking the official ACT exam in October. So exactly 6 weeks from today, he'll be taking an official test, and so we'll do a little bit of prep for that just to prepare him for the unfamiliar circumstance. We're going to be going over the ones that he got wrong. If you are interested in having us make a video of us going over the corrections, please leave a comment below. Or if you have any other questions about the ACT, definitely leave us a comment. The last thing that I'll say is that the ACT is actually not that hard of a test. That's something that many students find surprising, many parents find surprising, but it's actually not that difficult of a test. He's 12 going on 13. He said it was a 6 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. And I think that that's not abnormal, right? It's about setting expectations. And so to push a test like this off until senior year of high school and to say that that's when you're ready, I think is wrong thinking. Students like Jayden can handle it even at their age. I would say that those tests really should be mastered when a child or when a student is in middle school. And I think that we homeschool. I think homeschooling is the best way to go in terms of teaching kids. I think they learn the fastest. It's the most efficient way. You have a lot of one-on-one time with the students, and there are a lot of excesses and inefficiencies that are cut out when you are homeschooling. And I would also suggest and recommend that dads get involved with homeschooling as much as possible. I think that there's something to be said about dads. I know tons of moms are involved and they take the brunt of that, but I want to challenge the guys out there. I want to challenge the men, the fathers, and say it's actually your responsibility to teach your kids, to raise the bar, raise the expectations, and to keep them accountable to doing well. Academically, But more importantly, and I stress this, more importantly, even with Jayden, the 33 is great, but I tell him all the time, I'm not as impressed with his intellect as I am with his character. And with homeschooling, we have that opportunity to really shape and mold a child's character. And that is reflected in their academic pursuits and their academic aptitude, but or academic accomplishment. But I would say that the character, being a person of discipline, being a person of integrity, honesty, being a person of love for his siblings and for others, and also a person of humility. When he does great like this, instead of being puffed up, he gives glory to God and says, God, thank you for giving me this type of intellect and help me to steward it wisely for your glory. To have that type of attitude, that is the goal. And that's why we homeschool. All right, that's it. I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, again, please leave a comment. Thank you for watching.